Welcome to this episode of WordPress Essentials. But this just isn't WordPress Essentials, this is work with images. So the fundamentals of working with images and video for that matter within your website. It's about preparing your images for use on the web. So size, weight, proportion, how fast they load, what size and proportion they need to be to work on mobile versus large screen and small screen. So I'm going to take you through the basics of that. Just strip back the detail for a minute. We won't use WordPress. We're just working with images and seeing how they work within the HTML page. For example, if you're downloading images off your iPhone to use on your site, then they are absolutely way too massive. So we've got to manipulate them before you get them into your site, and equally the same for using images from stock libraries such as iStock or Adobe Stock, for example. So let's have a look. Size, weight and proportion. Let's go. So this component is looking at image sizing. It's really important to understand that the images that you usually import from either stock images that you purchase online or that images that you just download off your iPhone, for example, are way bigger than what you need on the web. That's the fundamental. So how big? What does it look like? Let's have a little bit of an experiment with this to see what we're looking at. I've mocked up an example just for so we can have a look at how that works. But if you're blogging, if you're updating your homepage, if you're adding a news article, whatever that might be, this is critical stuff to make sure your images load fast and look good on the site. This isn't a tutorial on manipulating the quality of the image. It's all about sizing. So let's have a quick look at this. I've downloaded an image off my phone, directly off my phone. This is the original image. What you need to know is here's 0 to 4,000 pixels wide, or over 4,000 pixels wide. That's a really wide image. So let's have a look at how that actually, if I just loaded that directly into a website, what size that would look like. So let's flip over to Firefox. So here's my his website, a web browser, and this is the image directly just added to the site. See how big it is and crazy it is? I can't even see. I see a little tiny part of the cloud on the site. So I'm just looking at this little bit here back in the main viewing area. So it's obviously way too big. So I'm scrolling across here, scrolling down. So it's just not going to work out. So what's critical here is it needs to be smaller. You cannot just upload from your iPhone. It's a big mistake people make. Not only is it too wide pixels, but it's actually probably 3 or 4 megabytes in size, and that's way too big. I'll talk about image weight a little bit later, but this is about image sizing. So what I normally do to quickly deal with this if I need to is in Photoshop there's a export function. I go, hey, I'm going to export this as, so if I've imported, it might be a TIFF or an original size image, the type that we don't want to use on the web. They really need to be JPEGs at this stage is what I'm looking at. But I normally bring it in. If it doesn't export like this, it's going to be something like a PNG. We don't want to use PNG for a standard image like this. It doesn't do the compression as well as what a JPEG would. So I'm going to export this as a JPEG. If I did 100% quality of the image, let's leave it at that for now. Over here, I'm going to put it back at 100% scale. So here's my original size image as a JPEG, 4,000 pixels wide and 3,000 pixels high. Obviously way too big. So what I tend to do is go, okay, I'm going to need one that's actually close to, like it might be a big background shot, for example. What I just do here is go, okay, let's just make this 2,000 pixels wide. It gives me a reference point, and it adjusts the height. If I click into the height, it adjusts the height as well. So it's scaled this image down so that I can do a direct export of a 2000 pixel wide image. So it may not work very well, so proportionately, but let's have a look at how that works. So go export all, dump it into a spot here. This is one I've prepared already. I'll replace it though because it's exactly the same. So it's loaded that into the site. So let's have a look at what that looks like in the browser. So here's my 2000 pixel wide site, so image, and you can see that it's still wide, but we're getting close to a standard browser. So the reason why sometimes we do a 2000 wide export is because we do need images to fill the browser screen. So if you have a look at National Geographic, that's a good example of a background image that goes off to the sides. So, doing 2000 pixel wides will get that image working as a background that spreads across. So if people have really wide screens, they're not going to get in trouble there. So that's quite a good example. Let's have a look at something else. So if I was going to use a image that's more within the content of the site, so when I say within the content area or content, then let's have a look at National Geographic again. So there's this imaginary, let's go, I'll just do a box here. So this space here, if you have a look at that, that's 1024. So it's not unusual for a width of a site. It can be 1200 wide. So, you would think something like this can be a very standard width these days of a site. So that's about, if you see that little number down in the corner, that's about 1200 pixels wide, so 1200 wide. So that's quite a common size to use. You may not have an image that goes right to the edge like that, but it's a good example of the width. So how do I do that? Exactly the same rules apply. I move over to my export feature in Photoshop. I change my width and it adjusts the height. So you see here I'm not actually changing the original image. Make sure you copy the image first before you do any of this, so you're making sure you're not writing over the original size. Okay, so I've got a 1200 width there. I could export that. I have exported in the past, so let's have a look at how that looks in my browser. Here's my 1200 wide image. So you can see we're now just starting to get into the ballpark of our image size that's going to work within a website. So if I didn't know the image size that I was going to use in Photoshop, in WordPress, I would tend to go, okay, let's just get the core image down to 1200, and WordPress creates a few different versions of that size anyway. So a thumbnail and a smaller size and a medium size and a large size. And then I could work with that inside WordPress, and look, we're pretty good to go there. That's a much better place to be than the 4000 pixel size image. I got a lot more to play with. If this is an image that's just in your content of a blog article or a news article, for example, and you knew that you weren't going to use it anywhere else on your site, then I would be exporting that at maybe 600 pixels wide, or so as a 600 wide, or something like 450 perhaps. So we're getting that down to a much more smaller size. Remember, with images, you can't save out as a really small image and then blow it up to display as a image that's much larger. The reason for that is because it pixelates the quality of the image, and it'll just look really crap. I'll show you an example of that later. So here's my 400, and I'll go back to one I prepared earlier in the site. So here's 450 pixels wide. so you can get an idea of the different size widths. That's the first thing to wrap your head around when you're dealing with image sizes. I previously mentioned that you can't really display a small image in the site, so an exported image that's nice and tiny in the site as a large image. It's just not how JPEGs work, and it's just not how images work on the web. You will get a really degraded image. So let's have a look at how that works. So here's down the bottom here, you'll see a 144 pixel wide image. So I've exported that out of Photoshop as a super tiny image. And look, that might be a thumbnail on the website, but you would never use that as a larger image. And here's why. I've displayed that image using code in the back end of the website. And you can see this is the 144 wide pixel displayed as 914 pixels wide. Have a look at the blurriness. There's just no sharp content. That just looks horrible. You would never ever do that, especially if you have a portrait of a headshot of a staff member or whatever. You do see that occasionally of it being blurred, and this is why. Taking a very small image and making it larger just doesn't work out. Now let's talk about image weight. So weight influences the speed of which an image is going to load in your website. More and more today, more than ever, Google is really taking a focus on how fast your website loads, how fast your landing pages load, all of that. Now, to resolve that, a big component of that is usually images. Now, there are a whole range of tools you can use on your website itself to try and mush down the image weight so you don't have to worry about this. But our philosophy is attack it at the source. So really, when you're dealing with your images on the site and uploading them to the site, make sure your images are right before you move forward. Therefore, and then you don't get any image issues down the track, and you're not going to get pulled up by Google. So actually do this first as you're working through, uploading to your blog, and take a little bit of time. So again, this is just basic tools within many image manipulating tools do this. I'm using Photoshop, but it's just using the basic export feature of the site. So my original image is still the same one that I've used before. And let's have a look at the base size. So I'm going to actually go back to my original sized image, and I'm going to look at it at 100% quality. So this is a JPEG, and so it's not the original size. The original size could be 25 meg in size. That would take forever to load on a standard internet connection. So you want these images to be down much lower in size. So 4,000 pixels. Remember, we would never use this this image size on the web. So let's get it down to like a background size image. So it's still quite large, outside the boundaries of a normal browser window, and it's 100%. So have a look over at the size number here. Now it's 1.6 megabytes. Now that is still way too large because if you've got 10 images in the home page, for example, different size images, different types of images in the home page, then there's 10 megabytes of images. That's way too large. What's a good target size? For a larger size 2000 pixel, anything under 200K, 200 kilobytes is getting there. So how do we achieve this? It's using the image quality size. Let's just have a look at what a JPEG size image is, a PNG size. So PNG doesn't handle loss, doesn't compress very well. So if you look over here, we're at 3.9. So we really don't want to use PNGs for larger style images. JPEG's a solid format, and it gets it down to 1.6 at 100%. So obviously we can do way better than that. Let's have a look at it at 80%. So 80%, what we're trying to do is find a balance between the quality of the image and the size of, or the weight of the file. So see, this has knocked it back, knocked maybe 50% off the weight. So that's really good. And it doesn't look like we've lost much quality of the image. That's looking pretty good. So what am I talking about quality of the image? Let's focus in here on the red wine glass and I'll show you what happens. If I go down to really 10% quality, so what you'll see, Photoshop does a great job now. Most applications, image size applications, do a great job of reducing the size but maintaining quality these days. Much, much better than what it used to do in the old days. But this is the type of thing that it does. So an image, so I've still got my 2000 pixels. I'm a quality at 10%, so I'm really low quality. And what happens is you'll start to see this sort of blocking of the sample of the color. So you don't notice it too much in this image, but in larger style, say you had a large background, a sky background, you'll see some real quite blocky style treatment of color, which doesn't look very good. So in this case, it actually doesn't look too bad at all. Like, that is pretty amazing that I'm not seeing really chunky blocks here at 10% and I'm at 82 kilobits. So, if this was a background image that didn't have to feature so much, so you see this blurring of the edges here where the sampling of the colors get really messy. So it loses all its sharpness. If I go to 80%, see that's you'll see it starts to get a bit more clearer. Let's go to 100%, and the images. So on the original image would have really sharp edges where the edges could be sharp, if you like. You know what I mean? So if we focus in on the wine glass again, let's focus right in. You get an idea. So here we can start seeing individual pixels of the top of the wine, and you can see all the pixels here, and especially in those transitions, and the quality. If I go to 10%, see those blocks just are so it's sampling a larger area of pixels. That's how it reduces the size, and it's up to you when you're doing this is to evaluate whether the image is of the right type of quality versus for how you're using it on the site. So there's 82 kilobytes. If this was a background and not a feature image or something like that, something I was just using randomly on the site as a background, I would probably go with this. That's a very lightweight image. 82 kilobytes is going to just launch like that on the site, and it's quite large. So you just need to experiment with how that works. Let's look at examples of how proportion works and the effect that has on an image. In this case, I have got my 1200 wide pixel that we prepared earlier, wide. So we're looking at a pretty full size image within a website width. Now, in some cases, clients go, I just only want to display that like 300 high and get that into this particular space, like a banner or whatever. So they just change the height of the image and not the width. So how do we do that? Here's an example of that image, just same width, 1200 wide, but mushed to 400 high or something. So look, we've got our fat wine glass here now, and you can see the image is now distorted. You can't change proportions of images on the web without sacrificing the quality of the image and really messing with people's minds. Let's have a look at, okay, I've kept my height, but I've changed the width. So now I've got a skinny glass and a smooshed up image that really does look pretty horrible. I wouldn't use that in any stage. It's just bad. Changing the proportion of an image is really nasty way to handle images on your website. So we try to avoid it. How do you avoid it? Again, within our Photoshop, we're going to look at our export feature. Let's go back to 100%. So the quality proportion isn't affected by quality. It's usually around these two numbers. So at this point, we're really connecting. This is set up so that the width and height are totally connected. And so what happens is if we change our pixel width, the height adjusts with it as well. This is the way to maintain the image quality and not mess with the proportion. Proportion is about maintaining the width and the height ratio at all times. So how do we deal with proportion? Sometimes I go, well, hey, I don't want all of this image to display. My actual place to display it or is only 300 high. How do I deal with that? So actually you deal with it back in the original image. And so let's have a look. If we wanted a thin, broader image, which is quite common in a website banner, for example, we still need width. So at this stage, this is a 4,000 pixel width image. So what I would tend to do is adjust it to my max size that I want it to be. So say it is 2,000 pixels. So I've adjusted that down. Let's just go in a little bit so we can see a bit more. And say I just wanted a banner that just had a little bit of this, the wine glass and the image. So that's still 900 high. That's a lot. That's pretty much a whole web screen at that height. So that could be how you wanted to do that. But maybe I just want to focus in. I just want a really thin bit of the sunset or something. So see where I'm adjusting my size. I'm maintaining the proportion of the image. So, but doing a crop. So this is the size of the image, the boxed area here. I would then use image crop to get my appropriate banner width, and then I would export as the appropriate size. So now we're dealing with 900 wide. Let's look at our 100%. So we're at 2,000 pixels wide. Our height is 643. That's still a very, very large image. Maybe too wide, for example, and too high. But at least my proportions are correct. I'm going to maintain the quality of the image at the right size, but I'm taking a smaller part of the image. So let's back out of that and undo crop. Okay. So quite often we see the same thing apply when you just want a in-content image, and because the web is smaller in some instances, you may just want to take a snapshot of the actual wine glass in your content and wrap some paragraph text around it. So in which case I'd actually crop elements out of that, or maybe I wanted a little bit of the sunset as well. So this part which is the main feature part of the image, I would sample up, crop it, and then go to my export feature. So I've maintained my proportions. See my image size here, let's have a look at 100%, is 974 pixels. I'm quite high now. That's usually above the fold content needs to be less than 600 pixels. So that's still quite a large image. I could shrink it down for weight wise. So I'm down to 69 kilobytes in weight, which is really good. And if it's an in-content image, I could drop that down to 300 pixels wide. And hey, look at this, 11K. That's super fast loading. I'd line up with some good wrapped content. And yeah, we're now dealing in a case-by-case basis where our images are a really nice size, but they're in proportion. A common issue we find with finding out the right size image or the right proportion image and matching a particular size of an image within a website can be tricky. We don't know exactly the right size, but quite often it's a connection between proportion and size, not just grabbing the appropriate size, because as we shrink down to mobile and larger web screens, we have a whole bunch of issues around that. So here's an easy way to grab and find the most appropriate size for the screen. We get phone calls all the time from clients saying, hey, what is the size of that image? It's more about a particular proportion first. So let's have a look at how this works. I would take, in most instances, I would take a screenshot. There's a couple of different ways. There's a ruler plugin you can get in your browser that does like hey, what is this particular size? And it'll give you the aspect ratio and the size of the actual screenshot you're taking. Alternatively, you can just take a full screenshot is quite good in this instance. And then I'd go over to my editor of choice. I would open the screenshot in my tool. In this case, I'm in Photoshop. I would focus in quite closely on the particular image. So I wanted to actually replace this particular ostrich image with my own, just as an example. I would go in using the select tool. I would crop in. It's a bit of an old school way to do it, I guess, but anyway, let's do this. So there we go. I have cropped. I'm about to crop, image crop. So now I have the right scale and proportion of the block that I need to find my image for. Let's just focus that down so I can see the right thing. So I'm going to replace this entire image with my image that I need. So let me go back to my baseline shot. I am going to select all of this and copy it, paste it over my screenshot. And now you can see that the image that I've pasted is too large for this image where I want. So now I need to resize it. So this is a new layer in Photoshop. So I would just go transform, scale, and drag this image. So you can see that, hey, it's either going to fit, like that. So we kind of want to try and find the most appropriate match to that. Then I can just, accept that, save, export, and I've got the image that fits that, and I know it's going to match the website. It's a very handy trick, just those screenshot, take the screenshot, and then you've got an image to work with within that shape. Alternatively, if you wanted to crop into that, let me just undo that transform. Say I wanted to just use a different part of that image. So, I wanted to focus right in on that image. So it's a mix of positioning. Because I've got a larger image here, I can work it within this shape to find the most appropriate image I wanted to do. Say I had some writing of text over the top, so that could go over this sort of background here, and I'd have more of my wine glass. So there's a whole bunch of different things, but it's about using form and shape of the image to match where it is located. But you can see that using just some simple tools, let's transform that again, that it fits within the screen nicely. This new version of Photoshop, you don't have to hold the Shift key down to maintain the proportion anymore. So it's a little bit of a reverse of what it used to be. So there's my image. I would go export, export as. Now again, I wouldn't use PNG obviously because I want a better, smaller, lightweight image. Here's mine. I'm down at 50%. I've still got pretty good quality, and I'm at 97 KB, and you know that width is 1200. And I would export, and I'm ready to go to insert into WordPress. And then the WordPress will look after the proportion to get into the shape, but at least I know I've got exactly the right proportioned size image to fit that box. So there we go.